All right, let's talk about a huge question mark hanging over Bitcoin's future. It's a big one, and honestly, it could decide whether it survives in the long run.
So let's just dive right in. The whole Bitcoin network, as you know, is protected by miners. These are the folks spending incredible amounts of energy to make sure every transaction is legit. But who's paying them? And maybe more importantly, is that paycheck going to be big enough to make them stick around? It really all boils down to how the network pays for its own security.
And yeah, that's the big catch here. The method that has kept Bitcoin safe and sound for more than a decade is, well, it's changing in a really fundamental way. The economic engine that got us to this point is not the one that's going to carry it forward. And that, my friends, creates a massive ticking challenge.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this problem, we've got to talk about something called the security budget. Just think of it like the total payroll for all the miners, the salary they get for protecting the entire network.
A massive chunk of that payroll comes from brand new Bitcoin being created. It's called the block reward. But here's the thing. This reward is hardwired to get sliced in half roughly every 4 years. It's an event called the halving. And as you can see from this timeline, that income stream for miners is drying up, and it's happening fast.
This brings us to how the system was supposed to work in the first place. See, the block reward was never meant to be a permanent thing. The original design was that, over time, tiny little transaction fees from millions, even billions of people using the network every day would add up and completely replace it. In other words, Bitcoin was built to pay for its own security simply by being useful.
And boom, that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If the main Bitcoin network is deliberately kept slow and transactions are kept expensive, well then where are all those fees going to come from? It can't possibly generate enough revenue to pay for its own protection. This is the ticking clock everyone's worried about.
So with this huge problem on the horizon, a pretty clever workaround has been put forward to try and patch things up. The idea involves something called merge mining with sidechains.
The basic idea here is to change what the main Bitcoin chain is even for. Instead of being digital cash, it becomes just a final settlement layer, a kind of deep storage vault. All the actual day-to-day stuff, the buying, the selling, the sending, all of that would happen on these other connected blockchains, which we call sidechains.
Merge mining is the magic that would supposedly make this all work. It's a cool technique that lets miners use their powerful computers to secure both Bitcoin and a sidechain at the exact same time, with the same effort. It lets these smaller chains kind of borrow the giant security blanket of the Bitcoin network without any extra energy cost.
So you might be asking, why would miners even do this? Well, the incentive is actually pretty straightforward. They get paid twice for doing the work once. They get their normal rewards from the main Bitcoin chain, plus they get to collect all the transaction fees from the busy sidechain. The hope is that those sidechain fees will be enough to prop up the security of the main chain.
It sounds pretty smart, right? A perfect little patch. But what if this fix actually creates way more problems than it solves?
Okay, first problem. To even get your Bitcoin over to one of these sidechains, you have to use something called a bridge. The trouble is, these bridges often end up being just another middleman, a centralized company holding your funds. And that creates a giant target for hackers, censorship, or even governments to freeze your assets. You know, all the stuff Bitcoin was supposed to get rid of.
Next up, you get this weird situation of fragmented money. With dozens of different sidechains, your funds basically get stuck in these little walled gardens. If your money's on sidechain A, you can't easily pay someone who's on sidechain B. The whole idea of one single universal money, it just gets shattered into a million pieces.
And this one is the real kicker. With this model, the security of what's supposed to be the most secure network in the world now completely depends on the success of these other, separate, and much less secure networks. If those sidechains don't take off or if users leave, the money paying for the main chain security just evaporates.
It leads to this totally absurd situation. The whole security model gets flipped on its head. As this fantastic analogy puts it, it's like a giant, powerful rhino asking a tiny little bird to carry it. The strong thing suddenly becomes completely dependent on the weak thing just to survive. It makes no sense.
All of this really makes you stop and question the whole idea. What if the base layer, the main chain, was never meant to be this fragile thing that needed patching? What it was always meant to be strong all by itself?
So this lays out two totally different philosophies. On one side, you have the patchwork approach. On the other, you have a vision that goes back to the original goal. Just make the foundation itself unbelievably strong, fast, and cheap enough to handle everybody's transactions.
In any healthy, logical system, it's the powerful, secure base layer, the Rhino, that should be carrying the applications built on top of it. The Rhino provides the strength, not the other way around. That's just the natural order of things.
This principle has a name. It's called on-chain scaling. And a project that's really committed to this vision is Bitcoin Cash, or BCH. The whole argument is that the main blockchain should be built from the ground up to handle global demand. By doing that, it generates its own security budget from millions of users happily paying tiny fees, solving the entire problem by its very design. No patches needed.
So when you really strip away all the technical jargon, we're left with two fundamentally different paths forward, two possible futures for all of crypto.
One path leads us down a rabbit hole of complexity, a tangled web of middlemen where your money is fractured and security is borrowed. The other path aims for something simple, direct, and unified, a system built from day one to be what it was always meant to be, peer-to-peer electronic cash for everyone.
And at the end of the day, that's the real question that's going to define the future of this amazing technology. Which one of these paths actually fulfills that original, incredible promise of a financial system that works for everyone, everywhere? Now that is something worth thinking about.